Friends, welcome to my channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It's not difficult for you, but it's nice for me, and we're starting. On Friday evening, I was woken up by the doorbell, and I noticed that my wife Tracy was still not in her usual place on the couch in the living room. So instead of Tracy opening the door and me continuing to doze in the chair, I had to lift the back of the chair vertically and open the door myself. On my way to the door, I noticed through the window that police lights were flashing on the street from at least a couple of police cars. Due to the fact that I was dozing, I didn't immediately realize that they had stopped in front of my house until I actually opened the door and looked past the man standing at the door at the scene in front of me. The man in the doorway had a gun, and he introduced himself as Sergeant John Kerrigan. He was covered by two uniformed policemen, also with guns drawn. And, as I soon found out, there were also two more uniformed policemen at my back door. I did what any sane person would do when three guns were pointed at him. I raised my hands and retreated deeper into the house, and the cops followed me. It turned out there was an incident at the local motel tonight, and they wanted to know where I'd been all evening. I told them that I left work at 6 p.m., went straight to the gym and worked out there until about 7:15 p.m., had a quick snack at Arby's on the way home, and sat in front of the TV from about 8 p.m. and watched reruns of Urgent Notice while waiting for my wife to come home from work on the evening shift. And, by the way, considering that it was about 0.15, she was late. So you don't have anyone who can confirm that you were here from 8 p.m. to 11:30 p.m.? Sergeant Kerrigan asked. Only two cats, I said, trying to hide my growing discomfort with humor. Mr. Easterling, it appears that your wife and her friend were shot and killed at the Safeway Motel on Grand Street this evening. And since you have no alibi for this period of time, you will have to come with us. They were shot. Are they dead? I stumbled. Holy shit. Was she with that piece of shit Pete Lombardo? Exactly. How do you know that? Kerrigan asked, giving me a sidelong glance. Because she was having an affair with that piece of shit, and that's probably who she was with. My brain quickly switched over while the police were searching my house. They went through a bunch of our cupboards and drawers with my permission, because, to be honest, I had no idea what they were looking for until they found my 9mm SIG pistol and packed it in a bag. And then it dawned on me, they think I killed my unfaithful wife. Luckily for me, I haven't fired a SIG since the last time I was at the shooting range, about 2 weeks ago, and ballistics would confirm that. But the fact is, someone killed my wife and her lover in their motel room, and I had no alibi. It didn't look good for the old you-know-who. At the police station, Kerrigan insisted on listening to the whole dirty story about my marital status. Up to this point, the only one who knew was the private investigator I hired when I found out that Tracy was cheating on me, and an unknown neighbor who one morning, about 6 months ago, left an envelope with a note in my car, informing me about this incident. I threw the note away a long time ago, but basically it said that this neighbor saw my wife leaving a restaurant on the north side, accompanied by a handsome young man, and then gave him a quick kiss on the lips before they got into their cars and drove away. I probably reread this note 10 times, not believing it at first, but the more I reread it, the better I remembered it. Tracy was the love of my life, and I just couldn't believe she would ever leave me. We were married for 24 wonderful years, 2 kids went to college, 1 graduated, and I thought this is the woman I'm going to grow old with. At 47, the same age as me, Tracy was still a woman who could make heads turn when she walked into a room. Long blonde hair, snow-white skin, shimmering blue eyes, 40-cup breasts, and a cool ass that combined with intelligence and classiness at 5 feet 2 inches tall. I consider myself attractive, but to be honest, I don't understand how I managed to get it. The note shook me to the core. I thought our life together was perfect. She's incredibly responsive in bed, and I did my best to please her. So why is she cheating on me? That's where the private investigator came in. I hired him to keep an eye on Tracy for a month, from the moment she left the house in the morning until she returned to my place in the evening. Tracy usually got home before me because she usually worked from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., but sometimes she ran errands, had a drink with the girls, or had to stay at work for another half hour. I trusted her completely and never thought about it, even when, after drinking with the girls, she returned home after 22:00. Well, obviously I'm an idiot, because many of the errands, extra work, and drinking with girls were related to this Lombardo, as a private investigator informed me. We live in the southern part of a fairly large city, so meeting at a bar on the north side and then at a motel was usually the order of the day. And, judging by what he was able to find out from conversations with several attendants at the Northside Motel, Their affair lasted about a year. Lombardo's character was apparently a fairly new employee of Tracy's at the bank where she worked. He was 24 years old. He was blonde with blue eyes, with abs and a pair of rather large hands. I'm not a weakling, but I'm not that big of a guy either. So I guess it's all about the hands that won her over. However, when I tried to use her rudely in the past, she always refused me, saying she would rather make love than just make love. However, it wasn't about making love with him. It was pure love, and judging by the video, they had a lot of fun. Kerrigan brought me back to the real world, saying that he should have a copy of everything a private investigator has, including notes and observations, if my lawyer and I don't mind. I didn't see this as a problem, although I was smart enough to tell him that he would have to wait until I consulted with my lawyer. At that moment, I also felt obligated to inform him that I had met with a divorce lawyer and my plans were in the works. I know that made me look even more like a suspect, but I figured Kerrigan would find out soon enough, which would probably be even worse. I waited until Saturday morning to call my divorce lawyer at his house and ask for a criminal defense lawyer's recommendation, giving him a brief summary of the case. He gave me Steve Seavey's name and said he would call him right now and take him to the police station so I could get out of there and go home. Seavey got to the police station an hour later, and since the police didn't actually arrest me, he took me home before lunch. We talked briefly about the case at my house, and Steve said he would make room for me in his schedule for Monday. After Steve left, I called all 3 children and told them that their mother had died, that she had cheated on me, and that I was suspect number 1. As I expected, I received mixed responses from all 3 of them, although they all agreed that while I might have had the right to kill their mother, I still shouldn't have done it. It took a lot of explanations and hysterical sobs to explain to them that I didn't do it because someone obviously beat me to it. I told them not to return home yet because the situation is very tense, and I will let them know about the funeral arrangements when the police return their mother's body to me. Our eldest daughter, Ava, is 23 years old. She graduated from Indiana University and lives in California, where she is engaged in film production. The middle child, our son Robbie, is 21 and in his final year at Michigan State University, and baby Cheyenne, 19, is in her first year at Western Michigan. They are all beautiful children who obviously inherited their looks from their mother, and they are also smart. It was hard for all of them to even believe that Tracy was cheating on me, and in the end they gave up when I threatened to send them explicit photos from a private investigator. Then, I think each of them felt just as devastated as I did, experiencing something like a punch in the gut and dizziness. I remembered the first time I read an anonymous note saying that Tracy was cheating on me. I literally went to the bathroom, threw up, and I must have cried for an hour. After receiving the detective's report, I watched all the videos and read all the notes and reports. Unbeknownst to my wife, I specifically took time off from work to slowly inspect everything, and when I was done, I put everything in a box and put it in a closet in the basement. A few hours later, she came home from work, not caring about anything, and from that moment on, I had to pretend to be a loving husband while my insides were bursting. Our lives practically came to naught because I usually refused on one pretext or another, and although Tracy seemed worried at first, I think her side effect gave her enough satisfaction that she didn't seem to mind too much. Of course, the few times we made love, I kept wondering if I'd had careless seconds when she seemed a little more wet than usual. Of course, I wasn't going to go south to find out in my own language. 3 weeks after the murder, the police returned Tracy's body to me, and the following week we held her funeral. The children, of course, were beside themselves with grief. I was sad more than anything in the world. Although the police did not advertise this fact, almost everyone knows what it means when 2 people, one of whom is married, are caught in a motel. This only added to the strangeness of the farewell ceremony and funeral, especially when longtime neighbors came to pay their respects. Most of the guys couldn't look me in the eye, while half of the women seemed to have a permanent smirk on their faces. Then things got even stranger when one of Tracy's colleagues, Alex Grimaldi, pointed out with absolute certainty that my youngest daughter, Cheyenne, could be the twin sister of Mike Buttermore's youngest daughter. I remembered him that he was with us at a screening once. Buttermore was another of her colleagues. He had worked at the bank before Tracy started working there, and she had mentioned him casually several times over the years. Grimaldi was a close friend of Buttermore's and was by his side when both Buttermore girls were growing up. Buttermore's youngest daughter is named Leah. She is 20 years old. She studies at Ohio State University. Once upon a time, this coincidence would have meant nothing to me, but thanks to one small note, I turned into a paranoid idiot. Therefore, before the children went home after the funeral, I made sure to save the glasses that each of them used so that I could take DNA samples. I've never told them anything, but you never know, you know? For almost 24 years, I had no reason to suspect anything, and now I see cheating partners behind every door. 2 weeks later, my newfound paranoia was justified when the results of laboratory DNA tests of my children came back, and it turned out that two of them were not my children, at least biologically. According to the tests, my son and youngest daughter are not my children. I called, they confirmed it. Nope, not mine. However, they have the same father, it's just not me. I'm going back to Tool to take another leak. It's getting better. It was even more devastating than when I found out that Tracy was cheating on me. Are my children not mine? I raised these children. I gave them all the love I had. And now I realize that I loved another man's children. Tracy cheated on me not only with one guy, but with at least two. And all these years she forced me to love another man's children. Well, to hell with it all. I gave these children love. I raised these children. I may not be their father, but I am their father. Tracy took this secret with her to the grave, and there it will remain. However, I contacted my private investigator. I needed to get the DNA of this Mike Buttermore character. I needed to know if I should hate this guy, or worse. 2 weeks later, I received a reply. Obviously, long before Pete Lombardo, there was Mike Buttermore. And this affair lasted for several years, at least long enough to have 2 children. What a gullible fool I was. And what a lying fool she was. I needed to find out everything I could about this Buttermore guy, but the police were keeping an eye on me because of the ongoing murder investigation, and I really couldn't afford to be a stalker. By this point, I already had my detective's personal number on speed dial. His next assignment, a profile of Mike Buttermore, compiled over at least 22 years. It took my detective a month, but he did the job. Although none of the receptionists at any of the motels who recognized Lombardo recognized Buttermore, my private investigator found out the names of several former motel employees, and after tracking down several people, some of them remembered Buttermore and the woman he regularly came with, my Tracy, a few years ago. Then my detective tracked down Buttermore's personal secretary, who worked at the bank for a long time and retired 2 years ago, and showed her a picture of Tracy. This was enough for Winona Helvey, who was sorry to learn about Tracy's murder, but apparently knew her and sympathized with her from the years when she worked at the bank, to talk about the day's celebration of memories. It turns out that Tracy was considered Buttermore's working wife, helping him with most of his banking projects, choosing suits for work, and apparently even choosing several gifts for his wife for Christmas and birthday. According to Winona, they were inseparable, although it never seemed to her that it could take on too personal a character. She was such a sweet girl, very smart, and also pretty, Winona commented to my assistant over tea and waffles on the porch of her house. The story changed a bit when my private investigator finally had the opportunity to talk to Buttermore's current secretary, who had been working with him since Winona retired 2 years ago. Allison March noted that although the couple were close when she first came to work, about a year ago the relationship cooled down noticeably, to the point where they barely greeted each other in the office. Did she tell the police about this when they questioned people in the office after the shooting? No, because no one ever bothered talking to a simple secretary, she snapped when my private investigator asked. I called Kerrigan and went to the police station as soon as my detective left. I gave him all the information my detective had given me, as well as several DNA profiles that might be useful. I told him that I would explain these profiles if his lab staff found a match. 2 days later, Buttermore was arrested on suspicion of murder. The information we received from Winona and Allison gave the police the first real impetus in the investigation, and when Buttermore's DNA matched the DNA of my children, Kerrigan was able to get him to confess he killed Tracy and her lover, because 22 years later she replaced him with a younger model. He tried to get her back, but when she refused to even meet with him, something inside him snapped. Buttermore told Kerrigan that their affair began shortly after my wife had our first child. They usually met once a week, sometimes twice, for love. When they went to business conferences together, they stayed in the same room, although the company paid for 2 people. And sometimes they just told their spouses that they were at a conference when they just wanted to spend a few days together. Neither of the spouses seemed to doubt anything, and when Tracy became pregnant, she said that her loving husband would never doubt that the children were not his, so why spoil all the good things with his own words? She told him that she loved her husband, that he was a good breadwinner, but love with an outsider, a secret partner, was too much pleasure to give up. Every day at Buttermore's trial, I sat at the far end of the courtroom. When the district attorney found out that I hadn't had the slightest idea about Buttermore's affair with my wife for more than 20 years, he decided that I couldn't help the prosecution in any way, so I was never even called to testify about anything. And it was for the best, because Buttermore may have made love to my wife for over 20 years, but he also received a life sentence for her murder. He'll never know about it, but if he had waited at least another week, I would have been tried for the murder of this couple. Sitting in the back of the courtroom every day also gave me the opportunity to observe the daily ritual of Buttermore's devoted wife, Jen, who would enter the courtroom, walk up to the railing right behind the defendant's desk, and give him a long and soulful French kiss before taking her seat. It turned out that she wasn't too happy with the fact that Mike had been cheating on her with my wife all these years, and when she approached me with her plan of revenge love, what could I say? Maybe we'll continue like this even after they finally get divorced. That would be quite appropriate.